What truly happens in the mind of someone who pulls away the moment you finally decide to stop the chase? Most people expect relief, or maybe a quick return. But the reality of the avoidant dynamic is far more complex. When the pursuit ends, the avoidant's internal system is forced to recalibrate, and their predictable pattern of distance is suddenly thrown into chaos. Today, you will understand the three distinct psychological shifts that occur in the avoidant's mind when the chase stops, and exactly how to leverage this knowledge to reclaim your own emotional center, regardless of their reaction. If you have ever felt trapped in a cycle of pursuing someone who constantly retreats, stay with me. This isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding the invisible psychological wires that keep this dynamic alive. The pursuit is the invisible contract that defines the avoidant relationship. It is the core mechanism that allows the avoidant partner to maintain their preferred state of emotional distance without ever having to consciously ask for it. The moment you stop chasing, you are not simply changing your behavior, you are unilaterally tearing up that contract. This action immediately forces the avoidant out of their comfort zone, even if that comfort zone was defined by a chronic lack of true intimacy. Their entire strategy is built on the assumption that someone will always be there, just far enough away to be safe, but close enough to validate their existence. When the chase stops, that validation mechanism fails, and the first psychological shift begins, the internal reevaluation of their own self-sufficiency. For the avoidant, self-sufficiency is not a preference, it is a core defense mechanism. They have spent a lifetime building a fortress around the idea that they do not need anyone, that their emotional world is entirely self-contained. The chase, ironically, reinforces this belief. As long as you are pursuing them, they can look at your effort and conclude, "I am desirable, but I do not need this desire. I am fine on my own." Your pursuit confirms their value while simultaneously allowing them to reject the vulnerability that comes with reciprocating. When you stop, the silence is deafening. They are suddenly confronted with the possibility that their carefully constructed independence may not be as robust as they believed. The external source of validation has vanished, and they are left alone with the question, if no one is chasing, am I still valuable? This is the first convergence of ideas. The external action of stopping the chase forces an internal crisis of self-worth. This internal crisis is often masked by a second, more observable shift, the sudden, unexpected increase in their attention toward you. This is not necessarily a sign of true emotional awakening or a sudden desire for commitment. It is a behavioral correction rooted in the fear of loss, a loss not of you, but of their control over the dynamic. The avoidant operates best when they are in control of the emotional thermostat. They dictate the temperature of the relationship, usually keeping it cool and distant. When you withdraw your energy, they experience a drop in the emotional temperature that they did not initiate. This loss of control is deeply unsettling. Their system registers the change as a threat to their stability, and the immediate automatic response is to re-establish the equilibrium. They reach out, a text, a casual question, a sudden interest in your life. Not to connect, but to check if the emotional leash is still attached. They are testing the boundaries to see if the dynamic is truly broken, or if they can simply reel you back in with minimal effort. This is the second convergence. The cessation of pursuit triggers a brief, calculated re-engagement designed to restore their sense of control. Understanding this second shift is critical because it is the point where most people falter. They mistake the avoidant's sudden attention for genuine change and immediately resume the chase, thereby reinforcing the very behavior they were trying to break. The avoidant learns that distance creates pursuit, and withdrawal brings them attention. To truly break the cycle, you must recognize that this re-engagement is a test, not a transformation. The avoidant is not looking for intimacy. They are looking for confirmation that their system still works. Your continued non-pursuit, your quiet, steady focus on your own life, is the only response that can truly challenge their core belief system. It communicates a powerful, non-verbal message. My value is no longer tied to your availability. The third and most profound shift is the confrontation with their own suppressed emotions. The avoidant attachment style is fundamentally about managing overwhelming feelings by pushing them away. They intellectualize emotions, analyze them from a distance, or simply shut them down. The constant chase provided a distraction, a focus on the external dynamic that kept them from having to look inward. As long as they were busy avoiding your closeness, they didn't have to confront their own loneliness or their deep-seated fear of being truly seen. When you stop chasing, the external noise stops, and the internal silence begins. This silence is where the suppressed emotions, the grief, the fear, the unacknowledged need for connection, begin to surface. This is the point where the avoidant is most likely to either flee entirely or, in rare cases, begin the slow, painful process of introspection. Fleeing means finding a new relationship dynamic where they can immediately re-establish the chase and distance pattern, proving to themselves that their system is still functional. Introspection, however, means sitting with the discomfort. It means recognizing that the void they feel is not the absence of your pursuit, but the presence of their own unresolved emotional needs. This is the final convergence. Your act of letting go creates the necessary emotional space for the avoidant to confront the very vulnerability they have spent their lives running from. The key to navigating this period is radical self-focus. Your decision to stop chasing must be a decision to start choosing yourself. The energy you once spent analyzing their behavior, anticipating their withdrawal, and planning your next move must be redirected entirely toward building a life that is so fulfilling and emotionally secure that their presence becomes an addition, not a necessity. This shift in focus is not a tactic. It is a fundamental change in identity. You move from being the pursuer, whose value is external and dependent on the relationship, to the anchor, whose value is internal and unshakable. When you stop chasing, the avoidant is forced to deal with the reality of your absence, but you are finally given the gift of your own presence. The goal is not to make them chase you. The goal is to make your life so compelling that the outcome of their internal crisis no longer dictates your peace. The power dynamic shifts not because you manipulated them, but because you withdrew your power from their control. This is the ultimate act of letting go, and it is the only path to breaking the cycle for good. The avoidance response will be one of two things. They will either return with a genuine, albeit clumsy, attempt at connection, or they will retreat permanently. In both scenarios, you win. If they return, you are now in a position to set clear, healthy boundaries from a place of strength, demanding reciprocity instead of begging for attention. If they retreat, you have been given the clarity and the freedom to pursue a relationship dynamic that is built on mutual respect and genuine emotional availability, rather than the exhausting one-sided game of pursuit and withdrawal. The most important takeaway is that your peace is not dependent on their change. Your decision to stop chasing is the moment you reclaim your emotional sovereignty. The silence that follows is not a sign of failure. It is the sound of the old, broken contract dissolving, making space for a new, healthier dynamic, whether that dynamic includes them or not. Focus on the internal work, maintain your boundaries, and let the silence speak for itself. It is the language of true self-worth. The internal re-evaluation of self-sufficiency for the avoidant is a slow burn, not a sudden explosion. It begins with a low-grade anxiety, a feeling of unease that they cannot immediately attribute to an external source. Because their emotional regulation is so tied to maintaining distance, the lack of a clear external threat, the absence of your pursuit, leaves them disoriented. They are used to pushing against something. The void offers no resistance. This lack of resistance forces them to look at the other relationships in their life. Are those relationships equally distant? Are they truly fulfilling? The sudden cessation of the chase acts as a spotlight on the emotional emptiness they have carefully curated. They may try to fill this void with work, hobbies, or even other superficial connections, but the underlying psychological mechanism is at work. The question of "Am I still valuable?" morphs into "Is this distance truly serving me?" This is where the power of your silence truly takes hold. Your quiet, consistent withdrawal is interpreted not as a game, but as a definitive statement of your emotional independence. The avoidance system, which is highly attuned to subtle shifts in power, registers this as a major change. They are used to being the prize, the one whose attention must be earned. When you stop trying to earn it, you inadvertently shift the burden of effort onto them. They must now decide whether the connection is worth the effort of closing the distance, an effort that goes against every fiber of their avoidant conditioning. This is a moment of profound psychological friction for them. The calculated re-engagement, the second shift, is their attempt to resolve this friction without changing their core behavior. It is a low-effort maneuver designed to get a high-value return, your renewed attention. They might send a meme, ask about a trivial detail from your past, or even suggest a casual, low-stakes meeting. These are not invitations to intimacy. They are invitations to the old dance. The crucial step here is to differentiate between an attempt at control and a genuine step toward vulnerability. A control attempt is vague, non-committal, and focuses on external events. A genuine step, however rare, involves acknowledging the dynamic, expressing a feeling, or making a concrete, future-oriented plan. Your response to this re-engagement must be measured and boundary-driven. If you choose to respond, your communication should be brief, factual, and focused on the present. Do not fall into the trap of emotional outpouring or demanding explanations. A simple, "I'm doing well, thanks for checking in," followed by a return to your own focus, maintains the new dynamic. You are communicating that you are available for a healthy, reciprocal connection, but you are no longer available for the chase. This consistent boundary is the only thing that can teach the avoidant that the rules of engagement have fundamentally changed. The confrontation with suppressed emotions, the third shift, is the most volatile phase. The avoidant has built their identity on the suppression of need. When those needs begin to surface, it can feel like a psychological earthquake. They may become irritable, depressed, or even lash out, projecting their internal discomfort onto the external world. This is not a reflection of you. It is a reflection of the immense pressure their defense mechanisms are under. The silence you created has given their own feelings nowhere to hide. For the person who has stopped chasing, this period demands immense emotional maturity. You must hold the line of your non-pursuit without becoming cold or punitive. Your goal is not to punish them for their avoidance, but to liberate yourself from the cycle. This liberation is achieved through the consistent practice of self-validation. Every time you feel the urge to reach out, to check on them, or to fall back into the old pattern, you must consciously redirect that energy inward. Ask yourself, what need am I trying to meet by chasing them? Is it validation, security, or connection? Then, find a way to meet that need for yourself through friends, self-care, or pursuing your own goals. The ultimate converging idea is this. The moment you stop chasing, the relationship ceases to be defined by the avoidant's fear of intimacy and becomes defined by your commitment to your own emotional well-being. The avoidance system is designed to retreat from pressure. Your non-pursuit removes that pressure, forcing them to move toward you only if they genuinely desire connection, not out of habit or control. The quiet strength you demonstrate by letting go is the most powerful catalyst for change in the entire dynamic. It is the moment you stop playing their game and start living your own life. A life where emotional availability is a requirement, not a negotiation. This is the true meaning of letting go. The practical application of self-focus is the hardest part of the letting go process, yet it is the most rewarding. It requires a daily, conscious effort to redirect your mental energy. Think of your attention as a finite resource. Before, 80% of that resource was dedicated to the avoidant, analyzing their last text, wondering about their silence, or preparing for their eventual return. Now, that 80% is suddenly free. The challenge is that the mind, like nature, abhors a vacuum. If you do not consciously fill that space with meaningful activity, the old patterns of rumination and anxiety will rush back in. The first practical step is to create a no contact with intent policy. This is not the typical no contact used as a tactic to make someone miss you. This is a policy of self-respect where you commit to not initiating contact, not checking their social media, and not soliciting information about them from mutual friends. The intent is purely self-preservation and self-reclamation. Every time the urge to check their status arises, it must be reframed as an opportunity to invest in your own life. That minute spent checking their profile could be a minute spent planning a new project, reading a book, or simply taking a deep breath. This consistent redirection of energy is what builds the internal anchor of self-worth. The second practical step involves redefining your relationship with silence. For the pursuer, silence from the avoidant is often interpreted as rejection, a sign that they have failed. This is a learned response from the old dynamic. You must consciously recode that silence. The avoidant's silence is not a judgment of your worth. It is simply the sound of their own internal process. Your silence, however, is a statement of power. It is the sound of you choosing peace over chaos. When the avoidant reaches out with that calculated re-engagement, the second shift, your response must reinforce this new relationship with silence. If they send a vague text, you can wait hours or even a day to respond. Your delay is not passive-aggressive. It is a reflection of the fact that your life is full and their communication is no longer your top priority. The observable behaviors during the avoidance re-engagement phase are subtle but telling. They will often employ what is called breadcrumbing, giving you just enough attention to keep you interested, but never enough to require true vulnerability or commitment. This might look like a sudden, intense conversation about a shared interest, followed by a quick retreat. They are testing the waters, seeing if the breadcrumb is enough to bring you back to the table. If you respond with a full meal of emotional availability, the test is passed, and they retreat, satisfied that their control is intact. To counter breadcrumbing, you must practice emotional reciprocity matching. If they offer a crumb of connection, you offer a crumb back, but you do not offer the whole loaf. If they ask a superficial question, you give a superficial answer and then pivot back to your own life. For example, if they text, "How was your weekend?" Instead of launching into a detailed emotional account, you simply reply, "It was great, very productive," and leave it there. If they want more, they must ask for more, and that asking requires a level of effort and vulnerability that challenges their avoidant defenses. The long-term implication of maintaining this boundary is the most significant. When you consistently refuse to chase, you are forcing the avoidant to choose between two painful realities. The first is the pain of true loss, the permanent loss of a connection that, despite its dysfunction, provided them with comfort and validation. The second is the pain of vulnerability, the discomfort of closing the distance and engaging in a relationship that requires genuine emotional sharing and interdependence. The avoidant's entire life is structured to avoid the second pain, but your non-pursuit makes the first pain a very real possibility. This is the moment where the estructura de ideas convergentes truly culminates. The idea of the avoidant's internal self-sufficiency crisis, the idea of their calculated re-engagement, and the idea of their confrontation with suppressed emotions all converge on a single point. The avoidant must now make a conscious choice. They can no longer rely on the automatic, comfortable dynamic of being pursued. Your letting go has created a space where their behavior is no longer an automatic reaction to your pursuit, but a deliberate decision about their future. Your role in this final convergence is simply to be the constant. Be constantly focused on your growth, constantly respectful of your boundaries, and constantly unavailable for the old chase. This consistency is what provides the stability they lack, but it is a stability that is offered, not demanded. You are showing them what a healthy, adult connection looks like. Two whole people standing side by side, not one chasing the other. This is the ultimate act of self-love, and the only way to truly break the bond without diminishing your self-worth. The physical manifestations of the avoidant's internal crisis are often the most overlooked signs. When the chase stops and they feel the need to re-engage, their body language can betray their internal conflict. They might initiate contact but keep a physical distance, or they might engage in intense eye contact, followed by an abrupt shift in focus. These are micro-behaviors that signal the internal system is fighting itself, the desire to re-establish control, the re-engagement, battling the deep-seated fear of intimacy, the physical retreat. For the person who has stopped chasing, observing these micro-behaviors without reacting emotionally is a powerful tool. It allows you to see their actions as a reflection of their internal struggle, rather than a personal rejection. When they pull back physically after a moment of closeness, you do not need to chase them with words or questions. You simply acknowledge the space they need and redirect your attention without judgment or anxiety. This non-reactive observation is the opposite of the old dynamic, where every pullback triggered an immediate, anxious attempt to close the gap. The verbal cues are equally telling. During the re-engagement phase, the avoidant will often use weasel words, language that is vague, non-committal, and designed to minimize emotional risk. They might say, "We should hang out sometime," instead of, "I'd like to see you next Tuesday." They might talk about the relationship in abstract terms, focusing on logistics or external events, rather than sharing their feelings. This is a deliberate, albeit subconscious, strategy to keep the conversation on the surface, preventing the emotional depth that triggers their avoidance. Your response to weasel words should be to gently, factually, and without emotional charge, bring the conversation back to concrete reality. If they say, "We should hang out sometime," you can respond with, "That sounds nice. I'm free Thursday evening or Saturday afternoon. Which works better for you?" This forces them to move from the abstract, safe space of sometime into the concrete reality of a date and time, which requires a small but significant commitment. If they retreat again, you have your answer, and you can return to your self-focus without wasting energy on a vague promise. The concept of emotional sovereignty is the practical end goal of letting go. It means that your emotional state is no longer governed by the avoidant's actions or inactions. Their silence does not cause you anxiety. Their return does not cause you euphoria. You maintain a steady internal emotional climate. This is achieved by systematically dismantling the old beliefs that fueled the chase. The belief that their love was the only kind that mattered. The belief that their validation was necessary for your happiness, and the belief that you needed to fix or save them. The process of dismantling these beliefs is the final layer of the estructura de ideas convergentes. The crisis of the avoidant's self-sufficiency is mirrored by the growth of your own self-sufficiency. Their calculated re-engagement is countered by your clear, non-reactive boundaries. Their confrontation with suppressed emotions is met by your commitment to emotional honesty and self-care. All these threads converge to create a new reality, one where the relationship, if it continues, must be based on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine emotional vulnerability, a foundation that the old dynamic could never support. The ultimate power in this situation is not in making them change, but in realizing that you no longer need them to change for you to be whole. Your decision to stop chasing is the most profound psychological shift in the entire dynamic, and it is the only true path to reclaiming your peace and your self-worth. The silence is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of your own. The act of letting go is not a single event. It is a series of small, deliberate choices that accumulate into a massive shift in personal power. One of the most effective techniques for maintaining this boundary is the one-day rule for emotional processing. When the avoidant does something that triggers your old chasing impulse, a sudden withdrawal, a confusing text, or an unexpected return, you commit to processing that emotional reaction for exactly one day, and no more. During that 24-hour period, you allow yourself to feel the frustration, the sadness, or the residual anxiety. You journal about it, talk to a trusted friend, or engage in a physical activity to release the tension. The key is that after 24 hours, you consciously and deliberately close the file on that particular incident. You do not reread the text, you do not reanalyze the behavior, and you do not allow it to occupy your mental space. This rule prevents the emotional hijacking that was so common in the old dynamic, where one small action by the avoidant could derail your peace for days or weeks. This systematic approach to emotional regulation is what truly sets you free. The avoidance system is designed to create chaos and then retreat from the resulting emotional mess. By implementing the one-day rule, you are refusing to participate in the chaos. You are demonstrating to your own nervous system that emotional stability is now the priority, regardless of the external turbulence created by the avoidance patterns. This internal stability is the most attractive and challenging force to the avoidant, as it is the very thing they fear and secretly crave. Another crucial observable behavior during the avoidance re-engagement is the focus on the past phenomenon. When they reach out, they often bypass the present state of the relationship and reminisce about the good old days. They will talk about a funny memory, a trip you took, or a moment of intense connection. This is a safe space for them because the past is fixed and requires no current vulnerability. It allows them to feel close to you without risking the intimacy of the present moment. Your response to this past-focused communication must be to anchor the conversation firmly in the present or the future. You can acknowledge the memory briefly. That was a great trip. And then immediately pivot. I'm focusing on X project right now. What are your plans for the week? This gentle but firm redirection communicates that you are not going to live in the safe, non-committal space of nostalgia. You are demanding a present-day connection, which requires a present-day effort from them. If they are unwilling or unable to engage in the present, the conversation naturally ends, and your boundaries remain intact. The final, most powerful realization that comes from stopping the chase is the understanding of the avoidance core fear. Their deepest fear is not of being alone, but of being trapped by commitment, trapped by expectation, and trapped by the loss of their cherished independence. Your pursuit, no matter how loving, was interpreted as a trap, which is why they constantly ran. Your non-pursuit, however, is interpreted as freedom. You are not demanding anything from them. You are simply living your life. This lack of pressure is the only thing that can potentially disarm their core fear. When they see you thriving, independent, and emotionally stable. Without their presence, their internal narrative begins to crack. They realize that the person they were running from was not you, but the expectation of being trapped. Your freedom becomes a mirror, reflecting the possibility of a relationship where two people can be close without losing themselves. This is the ultimate convergence of the script's ideas. Your act of letting go is not the end of the relationship. It is the only way to create the conditions for a truly healthy connection to begin. It is the moment you stop chasing a fantasy and start living a reality defined by your own worth.